Tonight, we are going to walk together through some of the oldest and most tender teachings the world has ever known. They come from the Buddhist tradition, from the gentle wisdom of monks and teachers who spent their lives learning one simple thing: how to love fully and how to let go gracefully. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. The theme that runs through everything we will explore tonight is simple, and it is this: that love and loss are not opposites. They are two sides of the same precious coin. And when we learn to hold both of them gently, without grasping and without pushing away, something beautiful happens. A deep and quiet peace settles into the heart. A peace that does not depend on everything going the way we want. A peace that is already here, waiting for us, if only we are willing to soften enough to feel it. So settle in now. Let your shoulders drop. Let the weight of the day begin to fall away. There is nowhere you need to be but here. Nothing you need to do but listen. And when you are ready, let us begin our journey together. There is an old Zen saying that goes like this: the snow falls, each flake in its proper place. It is a quiet image, simple, and yet there is something in it that points to one of the deepest truths about being alive. That there is a rightness to the way things unfold, even when we cannot see it. That the seasons of a life, each one of them, carry their own kind of beauty. And that sometimes it is the later seasons, the ones we fear the most, that hold the greatest peace. Tonight, let us begin with something that may surprise you. It is a truth that the elders of many traditions have always carried, and it is this: happiness, real happiness, the kind that lives deep in the bones, often grows stronger as we age. Not because life becomes easier, not because the losses stop coming, but because, somewhere along the way, the heart learns a different way to hold what it is given. This is where our journey begins. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a beautiful phrase for the fullness of a human life. It speaks of the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows. Not 10,000 of one and none of the other. Both. Always both. Woven together like threads in a cloth, so tightly that you cannot pull one free without disturbing the other. When we are young, we often believe that happiness means finding the joys and avoiding the sorrows. We work very hard at this. We build plans and strategies. We chase after what feels good and run from what feels painful. And there is nothing wrong with this. It is a natural part of being human. But it is also, as the old teachers would say, a bit like trying to catch the wind in a jar. You can spend a lifetime at it, and the wind will always find its way out. But something begins to shift as the years pass. Not for everyone, and not all at once. But for many people, there comes a quiet turning, a softening, as if the heart, having been stretched open by so many years of joy and sorrow alike, simply begins to relax its grip. One ancient teacher described it in a way that has stayed with many who heard it. He said that happiness, true happiness, is not something driven by what happens to us on the outside. It is something deep and very human, something almost mysterious, that begins to bloom from within when we stop fighting the natural rhythm of things. The Buddhist tradition calls this the wisdom of impermanence. And it is not a sad teaching, though it may sound like one at first. It is actually one of the most freeing things a person can come to understand. Let us sit with this teaching for a moment, because it is the golden thread that runs through everything we will explore tonight. Impermanence simply means that everything is always changing. The weather changes. The seasons turn. The body you had at 20 is not the body you have now, and it will not be the body you have in 10 years. The people around you change. Your feelings change, sometimes from hour to hour. The world itself is in constant, gentle motion, like the surface of a lake that is never quite still. Now, when we are young, this can feel frightening. We want things to stay. We want the people we love to remain exactly as they are. We want our health and our strength and our favorite pleasures to last forever. And when they begin to change, as they always do, something in us tightens. We grip harder. We try to hold on. But here is what the elders have discovered, and what the Buddha taught so gently more than 2,000 years ago. It is the gripping that causes the pain, not the changing. The changing is simply life being life. It is the river flowing. And a river that stops flowing is no longer a river at all. There is a beautiful image that sometimes arises in meditation practice. Imagine you are holding a handful of water. If you hold your hand open, the water rests there, shimmering, alive. You can feel its coolness. You can watch the light play on its surface. But the moment you clench your fist to keep it, it slips through your fingers and is gone. Not because the water was cruel or unfair, but because that is the nature of water. It flows. And the hand that lets it rest gently, openly, is the hand that gets to feel it the longest. This is what begins to happen, naturally and quietly, as we move through the seasons of a life. We begin to realize, not as an idea, but as a felt knowing in the body, that holding on does not keep things from changing. It only makes the changing hurt more. And so, gently, the hands begin to open. There is an old Zen story about a monk who spent many years trying to understand the nature of suffering. He studied the great texts. He sat in meditation for long hours. He debated with his teachers and fellow students. And still, the answer eluded him. One morning, he was walking through the monastery garden when he came upon the head gardener, a very old woman who had tended the grounds for longer than anyone could remember. She was kneeling in the soil, pulling weeds with quiet care. "May I ask you something?" The monk said. "Of course," she replied, without looking up. "I have studied for many years, and I still do not understand. What is the root of suffering?" The old gardener sat back on her heels and looked at him with kind eyes. Then she held up a small plant she had just uprooted, its roots tangled and gripping clumps of earth. "Watch," she said, and she gently shook the soil from its roots until they hung free and open. "That is all there is to it," she said. "The roots grip because they are afraid of falling. But the earth was never going to drop them. It was holding them the whole time." She placed the plant in a new spot in the garden and patted the soil around it with her weathered hands. "We suffer," she said softly, "because we grip what is already holding us." The monk stood there for a long time, feeling something loosen in his chest. He later told his teacher that in that single moment, kneeling in the garden beside an old woman who smelled of earth and sunlight, he understood more than he had in all his years of study. This is the nature of the wisdom we are speaking about tonight. It does not come from books, though books can point the way. It comes from living, from the slow and gentle accumulation of enough mornings and enough evenings, enough hellos and enough goodbyes, that the heart begins to trust what it has always sensed but could not quite believe, that life is trustworthy, even in its passing. that the ground beneath us is steady even when the seasons turn. The Buddha himself spoke of this with great tenderness. He said, "All conditioned things are impermanent. Work out your own freedom with diligence." But there is a warmth beneath those words that we can sometimes miss if we read too quickly. He was not saying that life is bleak because nothing lasts. He was saying that when we truly understand the passing nature of all things, something remarkable happens. We begin to taste each moment more fully. We begin to see how precious this life really is, not in spite of its impermanence, but because of it. Think of it this way. If the cherry blossoms bloomed all year round, we might walk past them without a second glance. But because they bloom for just a few short days each spring, we stop. We look. We feel something open in the chest. We take them in with our whole being because we know they will soon be gone. Their beauty is not separate from their passing. Their beauty is made brighter by it. This is the gift that the wisdom of impermanence offers us. Not a grim reminder that everything will be taken away, but a gentle invitation to be here now, to really be here, to let this moment, whatever it holds, be enough. And this is why, as the years pass and the heart has been opened by enough joy and enough sorrow, many people find a happiness that their younger selves could never have imagined. It is not the happiness of getting what you want. It is the happiness of being fully present with what is. And that kind of happiness does not depend on circumstances. It does not need things to be perfect. It simply rests in the quiet miracle of being alive. Let us explore a story that carries this teaching. There was once an old traveler who had walked a very long road. He had crossed through green valleys in springtime, where wildflowers grew thick along the path and the air hummed with bees. He had walked through the golden heat of summer, through towns and villages, through seasons of abundance when the fruit hung heavy on the trees and laughter came easily. He had walked through autumn, when the leaves turned brilliant colors and then let go, drifting down to rest on the earth. And he had walked through winters, some of them very cold, very long, when the path was hard to see and the sky was gray for weeks on end. One evening, a young man met the old traveler at an inn and sat down beside him by the fire. "You have been walking a long time," the young man said. "You must have seen a great deal." "I have," the traveler replied. "Then tell me," the young man said, leaning forward with eagerness. "Which season was the best? Which stretch of the road held the most happiness?" The old traveler smiled. It was a quiet smile, the kind that comes not from cleverness but from something deeper. He looked at the fire for a long time before he answered. "When I was your age," he said, "I loved the springtime best. Everything was fresh and new. The world felt full of promise. And I spent much of my energy trying to hold on to that feeling, trying to keep spring from becoming summer, trying to keep summer from turning to fall." He paused. "But as I walked further, and the seasons kept turning as they always do, something in me began to change. I stopped waiting for the good season and dreading the hard one. I stopped trying to hold the warm days a little longer. And when I did that, the strangest thing happened." "What?" asked the young man. "I began to enjoy the walk itself," the old traveler said simply. "Not just the sunny stretches, the whole of it. I noticed things I had never noticed before. The way the rain sounded on the leaves. The way the cold air made my breath visible, like a small cloud rising from my lips. The kindness of strangers on a dark night. the feeling of arriving somewhere warm after being out in the wind for a long time. The young man was quiet for a moment, watching the fire. "But what about the winters?" he asked. "The hard stretches, the parts of the road that were cold and lonely. Did you not wish those away?" The old traveler considered this. The fire crackled softly between them. "At first, yes," he said. "I wished them away with everything I had. I cursed the cold. I asked the sky when spring would come. I walked faster, hoping to outrun the hard stretches." He chuckled softly. "But winter does not care how fast you walk. It takes its own time. So what changed?" "I stopped running from winter," the traveler said. "I let it be cold when it was cold. I let the path be hard when it was hard. And do you know what I discovered?" The young man shook his head. "That winter has its own beauty, its own quiet. There is a stillness in the cold that you cannot find in any other season. And there were people I met on the winter road, people who were also walking through their own hard stretches, and the companionship we shared was warmer than any summer day." He looked at the young man gently. "The happiness I have now is not the happiness I had in spring. It is quieter, deeper. It does not depend on the weather, and I would not trade it for anything in this world." This is the quiet secret the elders carry. Not that life becomes painless, but that something within us learns to hold pain differently, more gently, with less resistance and more tenderness. And in that gentleness, a space opens up, a space that is remarkably peaceful. In the Zen tradition, there is a teaching that says, "The flower that blooms in adversity is the rarest and most beautiful of all." This is not a teaching about being tough or enduring pain with a stiff upper lip. It is a teaching about what becomes possible when we stop fighting what is and instead let ourselves be softened by it. There is another ancient reflection that speaks to this truth. It says that when we truly understand that this life is passing, that we will not be here forever, all of our smallness falls away. The petty worries, the grudges, the fears about things that never come to pass, they lose their power. What remains is what is real. What remains is what matters. And what matters, when the small things are stripped away, is almost always the same: love, presence, the warmth of being here with an open heart. In some of the ancient teachings, this understanding is described as a quiet companion who walks beside us always. Not a fearful presence, not something dark or heavy, but a gentle reminder, as close as our own shoulder, that this life is not forever. And because it is not forever, it is infinitely precious. When we let this companion walk beside us, something changes in the way we move through our days. We stop putting things off. We stop saving our kindness for some better time. We stop waiting for the perfect conditions before we allow ourselves to be happy. Because we know, in a way that is deeper than thought, that this is the time. This is the moment. And it will not come again. There is a tenderness in this knowing. Not a sadness, but a tenderness. The same tenderness you might feel watching the last light of a sunset, or holding a sleeping child, or listening to a piece of music that moves you in ways you cannot explain. It is the tenderness of being fully here, fully awake, knowing that what you are experiencing is both beautiful and passing. The great Japanese poet who wrote haiku understood this well. He once wrote a verse about the simple act of noticing a morning glory blooming on a fence. Nothing grand, nothing dramatic, just a flower opening in the early light. And yet he saw in it the whole of life, the whole truth of impermanence. Beauty arriving, beauty lingering for a breath, beauty letting go. And in his seeing, there was a happiness that had nothing to do with holding on. This is not something we have to manufacture or achieve. It is more like something we uncover, as if the peace and the love were always there, buried under layers of busyness and worry and trying to control things, and all that was needed was a willingness to let those layers soften and thin. The Buddha had a phrase for this. He called it the peace that comes from laying down the burden. And the burden he was speaking of is not the burden of life itself. Life is not the problem. The burden is the constant effort of trying to make life be something other than what it is. The effort of gripping, resisting, controlling. When that effort softens, when those hands finally open, what is left is a feeling of ease that is deeper than any pleasure or comfort. It is the ease of simply being, of resting in the middle of this passing, precious life and finding it enough. And so, as we come to the close of this first chapter of our journey together, here is what we might carry with us. You do not have to wait until you are old to taste this peace. The wisdom of impermanence is not something that belongs only to those who have lived many decades. It is available to anyone at any age who is willing to pause long enough to notice this moment is passing. This breath is passing. This day will not come again. And that is not a cause for sadness. It is a cause for wonder. If you are comfortable, you might try something very simple right now. Just notice, gently, if there is anything you are holding tightly to in this moment. A thought, a worry, a wish for things to be different than they are. You do not need to push it away. You do not need to fix it or solve it. Just notice it, the way you might notice a cloud moving across the sky. And then, if you feel ready, see what happens if you soften your grip, even just a little. Not forcing your hands open, just relaxing them, and noticing what that feels like. There is a verse that has been whispered in monasteries for centuries. Let go a little, and you will have a little peace. Let go a lot, and you will have a lot of peace. Let go completely, and you will have complete peace. You do not have to let go completely tonight. Just a little is enough. Just this much. Let us pause here for a moment. Notice how you are feeling. Let whatever is present simply be here. And when you are ready, we will continue together. The Buddha once said, in the end, only three things matter. How much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. And perhaps the deepest place where love and letting go meet is in that tender territory of being with someone we cherish as they prepare to leave this world. It is one of the most sacred things a human being can do. And it turns out that what is needed in those moments is far simpler and far more powerful than we might expect. Let us explore a story about this. It is a story about a woman, a wife, who discovered something extraordinary about the nature of love, something she could not have learned from any book. She arrived at a meditation retreat on a quiet weekend in autumn. The trees around the retreat center had just begun to turn, and the air carried that particular stillness that comes when the world is preparing to let go of its leaves. She was a practical woman, organized, the kind of person who kept lists and liked to have a plan for things. She was the one in her family who remembered birthdays and appointments, who made sure the right forms were filed, who could be counted on to have everything in order. And she had come to this retreat with a very specific purpose, though she did not share it with the group at first. Her husband was very ill. He had been ill for some time, and the truth that both of them had been circling around, the way you might circle around a clearing in a forest before finally stepping into it, was now sitting plainly in the room between them. He did not have much longer. A few weeks perhaps. The days ahead were precious and few. Now, her husband was a man of deep feeling, though he did not always show it in the ways the world might expect. He had a quiet strength, a way of seeing things that cut through to what was essential. And when it came to this final passage, something in him wanted a different kind of company. He did not want formality. He did not want rituals performed by someone who did not truly know him. He wanted her, just her, fully present, fully there. And so he had asked her to go to this retreat, to strengthen something in herself that he could feel when she was at her best. A quality of quiet attention, a steadiness, a warmth that did not need to fix or manage anything, but simply allowed things to be as they were. It was, perhaps, the most loving thing he had ever asked of her, and also the most terrifying. She told the teacher about this on the second day, and she confessed something that had been keeping her up at night. She was terrified that she would fail him, that when the moment came, she would not be able to stay present, that she would crumble or freeze or retreat into the busyness that had always been her way of coping with things that felt too big. "What should I do?" she asked. "Should I read certain books? Should I study techniques for being with someone who is preparing to go? I want to do this right. I want to learn the right way." The teacher listened quietly and then said something very simple. "There is nothing wrong with reading, but what your husband is asking for is not something that comes from a book. What he is asking for is your presence, your loving presence. That is all. And that is everything." She returned home after the retreat with a new phrase resting in her heart. It had come from a wise, contemplative teacher who was known for his gentle approach to prayer and presence. The phrase was simply this: "I consent." Not "I approve." Not "I like this." Not "I understand." Just "I consent." A soft word. A word that means, I am willing to be here with what is happening, even though it is hard. I am willing to let this moment be what it is. She liked the simplicity of it. It felt like something she could hold on to when her usual strategies of planning and organizing were no longer of any use. But in the first days after she returned, she found that old habits do not step aside easily. Her husband was having good days and difficult days, and on the difficult days, her instinct was to spring into action. Make tea. Adjust the pillows. Call someone. Do something. Anything to create a sense of forward motion, a sense that things were being managed. One evening, he was lying in bed and he began to talk about what was ahead. Not in a heavy way. More in the way you might talk about a long journey you are about to take. He spoke about what it felt like to know he was nearing the end of this particular road. He spoke about what he hoped for and what he was afraid of. And she panicked. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice bright in that way that covers fear. "Today was a good day, wasn't it? Let me go make you some tea." She stood up and walked to the kitchen, and the moment she did, she felt it. A kind of silence fell over the room that was different from the peaceful silences they had shared. This was the silence of a door closing. She had shut something down. Something real and important had been trying to move between them, and she had turned away from it. She stood in the kitchen with the kettle in her hand, and her heart sank. She knew with a clarity that cut through all her usual defenses that she had just done the very thing she was most afraid of doing. She had failed to stay. She had chosen the safety of doing over the vulnerability of being. The kettle began to whistle, and the sound felt almost absurd in the stillness. She turned off the flame and stood there, her hands on the counter, her forehead bowed. And then, standing there, in the quiet of the kitchen, she began to whisper a kind of prayer. Not a formal prayer, not something from a book or a service, just the simplest, most honest words she could find. The kind of words that come from a place deeper than thinking. Please, may I remember loving presence. Please, may I remember. She said it again and again, softly, like a mother humming to a child in the dark. And something in her began to soften. The tight knot of fear in her chest did not disappear, but it loosened, just enough to take a breath, just enough to turn around and walk back into the room. There is an old teaching that says, the prayer does not change the situation. The prayer changes the one who prays. And this is what happened. Her prayer did not take away the difficulty of what lay ahead. It did not remove her fear or her grief, but it shifted something in the center of her. It reminded her, in the place where she most needed reminding, of what she had come here to do. Not to manage, not to fix, just to love, just to be here. She went back to the room. She sat down beside him. She did not say anything right away. She just sat there, feeling the warmth of his body beside hers, hearing the rhythm of his breathing. And then, very gently, she took his hand. I am sorry, she said. I got scared. Will you tell me again? And he did. This time, she stayed. When fear rose up in her, she silently said to herself, I consent. When she felt the ache of knowing what was coming, she whispered inwardly, I consent. When tears came and she wanted to excuse herself so he would not see her cry, she breathed, and she stayed, and she let them come. Something extraordinary began to happen in those days and weeks. The more deeply she practiced this simple willingness, the more she found that she did not need a plan. She did not need instructions or techniques. A deeper knowing began to guide her. She knew when to speak and when to be quiet. She knew when to hold his hand and when to simply sit near him. She knew when he needed to hear her voice and when he needed to hear her sing. It was as if loving presence, once she stopped blocking it with her busyness, had its own intelligence, its own wisdom. There is an old saying in the contemplative traditions, the heart knows the way. The mind just draws the map. And this is what she discovered. All her planning, all her studying, all her list-making had been the mind trying to draw a map for a journey that only the heart could navigate. And the heart's way of navigating was beautifully simple. It just needed her to be here, fully here, without an agenda. Some days were harder than others. There were afternoons when he was in pain, and every fiber of her being wanted to fix it. There were nights when the fear of what was coming sat so heavily on her chest that she could barely breathe. And in those moments, the words "I consent" were not easy. They were not light or graceful. They were like lifting a great stone. But each time she said them, each time she chose willingness over resistance, the stone grew a little lighter. She noticed something else too. The more she stopped trying to manage the situation, the more her husband relaxed. It was as if he had been carrying not only his own fear but hers as well. And as she softened, he softened. The room itself seemed to change. The air became easier to breathe. There was more laughter than she would have expected, more tenderness, more of the small, ordinary gestures of love that had always been the real fabric of their marriage. A hand on a cheek, a shared silence, a look that said everything without a single word. The intimacy between them in those final weeks became something neither of them had ever experienced before. It was as if all the years of their marriage, all the ordinary days of cooking and working and disagreeing about small things, had been leading to this, to a quality of being together that was completely bare, completely honest, completely tender. She told a friend later, "I thought those weeks would be the darkest of my life." And in some ways they were, but they were also the most beautiful. I have never loved anyone as fully as I loved him in those days, and I have never felt so loved. There is a teaching in the Buddhist tradition that says, the heart that breaks open can contain the whole universe. This is not a teaching about suffering. It is a teaching about capacity, about what becomes possible when we stop protecting ourselves from what we feel and instead allow our hearts to be as large as they need to be. This is what happened to this woman. Her heart, which she had been trying so hard to protect, broke open. And instead of the devastation she had feared, she found something vast. A love that was not dependent on whether her husband stayed or went. A love that was not attached to any particular outcome. A love that simply was. After he passed, gently, in the quiet of their home, she shared something with the teacher she had met at the retreat. She said, "He is gone, but the love, the real love, the love that we discovered in those last weeks, that is still here. It has not gone anywhere. I think it was always here, and we just finally stopped being too busy to feel it." There is something in this story that touches the very heart of the Buddhist understanding of love. In the ancient teachings, there is a word, metta, which is often translated as loving kindness. But it is something more than kindness as we usually think of it. Metta is a quality of warmth and goodwill that is not dependent on conditions. It does not need the other person to be healthy or happy or even present. It is a love that flows like sunlight, not because of what it falls upon, but because that is its nature. The Buddha taught that this kind of love is not something we create. It is something we uncover. It is already within us, the way warmth is already within a flame. We do not have to add anything. We only have to stop blocking it. And this is what the woman in our story discovered. Not by studying or planning or doing everything right, but by being willing to stop running, by being willing to stay in the room, by being willing to feel what was there to be felt, even when it was overwhelming. She discovered that love is not something that lives between two people and disappears when one of them goes. Love is something that lives within us, and it is awakened by our connection with others, but it does not depend on those connections to survive. It is deeper than any single relationship. It is, as the old teachers say, our very nature. This woman went on living, as we all do. The days after her husband's passing were not easy. There were mornings when the house felt too quiet, and the bed felt too wide, and she would stand in the kitchen making tea for one instead of two, and feel the absence like a weight in her chest. But something had shifted in her that could not shift back. She had tasted a quality of love that was vaster than she had ever known, and even in the difficult days, she could feel it glowing softly in the background. Not always in the foreground, not always easy to reach, but there, like embers that never quite go out. She began to notice it in unexpected places, in the way sunlight fell across the kitchen table in the morning, in the kindness of a neighbor who brought food without being asked, in the sound of rain on the roof at night, which had always been one of her husband's favorite things. She would lie in bed listening to the rain and feel something that was not quite sadness and not quite joy, but something in between, something tender and wide and very, very alive. "He is gone," she told the teacher from the retreat, months later. But the love, the real love, the love that we discovered in those last weeks, that is still here. It has not gone anywhere. I think it was always here, and we just finally stopped being too busy to feel it. There is a Zen phrase that says, "The moon does not need to ask the lake to reflect it." And in the same way, love does not need to ask us to feel it. It is already shining. It is already present. The only question is whether we are willing to be still enough, open enough, to let it in. Most of the time, in our ordinary lives, we are so busy doing things, planning things, worrying about things, that we do not notice this love. It is like a quiet melody playing beneath the noise of a crowded room. It is always there, but we cannot hear it until the room grows still. This is one of the gifts that difficult times can offer us, not that we would ever choose them, but that in their presence, the room often does grow still. The things that usually occupy our attention fall away. The plans, the ambitions, the small disagreements. And in that stillness, we hear the melody, we feel the love, and we realize that it has been playing all along. This teaching, this understanding that love is not something that can be lost, is one of the most healing truths in the Buddhist tradition. It does not take away the ache of missing someone. It does not erase the longing to hear their voice again or to feel their hand in yours. Those feelings are real and they are sacred and they deserve our full, tender attention. But beneath the ache and the longing, there is something steady, something that does not come and go with the changing circumstances of our lives. And when we learn to rest in that steadiness, even for a moment, we find a peace that is not dependent on anything outside of us. The woman in our story found this peace, not by willing it into existence, not by following a technique, but by doing the simplest and most courageous thing a human heart can do, staying present when everything in her wanted to run. And this is, perhaps, the deepest teaching of her story. That loving presence is not a skill we acquire. It is something we already are, underneath all our strategies and defenses and plans. And when we let those fall away, even for a moment, what is left is more than enough. It is everything. There is a verse from the old teachings that says, "Thousands of candles can be lit from a single candle, and the life of that candle will not be shortened." Love is like that candle. It does not diminish by being shared. It does not run out. And it does not go dark when the one who lit it is no longer beside us. It burns on, quietly, steadily, in the hearth of the heart. And if you listen closely, you can feel its warmth right now. Let us pause here for a moment. Just breathe gently and let yourself arrive in this present moment. And when you are ready, we will continue together. Grief is one of the most honest things a human being can feel. It is not a problem to be solved. It is not an illness to be cured. It is the heart's way of telling the truth about what matters. And in the Buddhist tradition, it is understood as something deeply natural as rain, as natural as the turning of the seasons. Even the animals grieve. Even the trees, when they lose their leaves in autumn, stand bare and open to the sky, as if to say, something has gone, and I will not pretend otherwise. There is a quiet courage in that kind of honesty. And tonight, let us spend a little time together exploring what grief can teach us, not to make it heavier than it needs to be, but because within its depths there is a door. And on the other side of that door is a warmth and a belonging that many people describe as one of the most beautiful things they have ever known. There is a pattern to grief that almost everyone recognizes, though no one experiences it in quite the same way. It comes in waves. Some days, you wake up, and for a moment, everything feels almost normal. The sun is coming through the window. The birds are doing what birds do. And you feel, for just a breath, that old familiar sense of being at home in your life. Then the wave comes. Sometimes gently, like a tide rising. Sometimes suddenly, like being caught in a current you did not see. It can happen in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. You open a cupboard and there is a cup that belonged to someone you love. Or you hear a song that they used to hum. Or you walk past a place where you once sat together, saying nothing, just being. And suddenly the ground shifts beneath your feet, and the missing is so sharp and so real that it takes your breath away. This is the nature of grief. It does not follow a schedule. It does not wait for a convenient time. It comes when it comes, and it asks only one thing of us, to let it be here. In the ancient teachings, there is a word for this kind of allowing. It is sometimes translated as acceptance, but that word can feel too tidy, too composed, for what grief actually is. A better word might be honoring. When we grieve, we are honoring the truth that something precious was here, and now it has changed form. We are honoring the love that gave rise to the missing. We are being honest with ourselves and with life in a way that takes real courage. Let us explore a story about a man who lost someone very dear to him. He had been close to his father his whole life, but especially in the later years, when the relationship had mellowed and deepened in the way that some relationships do when the years have worn away the rough edges. They had moved past the stage of misunderstanding each other and had arrived at something simpler. A kind of quiet companionship, an ease. His father had a habit of calling him on weekend mornings, not to discuss anything important, just to talk about the weather, about what was growing in the garden, about a bird he had seen that morning. Small, ordinary things. And these calls, which might have seemed unremarkable to anyone listening from the outside, were the fabric of their connection. The steady, gentle thread that held them together across the distance. Sometimes the conversations would last only a few minutes. His father would say, "The tomatoes are coming in nicely," and he would say, "That's good, Dad," and there would be a pause, and then his father would say, "Well, I just wanted to hear your voice," and that would be that. It was not the words that mattered. It was the ritual, the showing up, the small, faithful act of reaching across the distance to say, without saying it directly, "You are in my thoughts. I am glad you are here." When his father passed, the grief came in waves, just as we have described. And the waves that caught him most off guard were not the ones that came during the formal occasions of mourning, when he expected to feel the loss. The waves that brought him to his knees were the quiet ones. A Sunday morning when the phone did not ring. The sight of a particular kind of bird in the garden. A change of season that he wanted to mention to someone who was no longer there to hear it. He told a close friend, "It is the small things that undo me. Not the big moments. The small things." I walked past a market stall selling tomatoes the other day, and I had to sit down on a bench because it hit me so hard. At first, he resisted these waves. He tried to keep busy. He threw himself into work. He told himself that he was fine, that he had been fortunate to have such a relationship, and that he should focus on gratitude rather than sorrow. But the waves did not care about his strategies. They kept coming. And then, slowly, something began to change. Not because he did anything dramatic, but because he grew tired of fighting. He simply did not have the energy to resist anymore. And so, one morning, when the wave came, he let it. He was sitting in his kitchen with a cup of tea, and he looked at the phone, and the missing rose up in him like water, filling a room. And instead of standing up and finding something to do, he stayed. He set down the cup. He closed his eyes, and he let the grief be as big as it wanted to be. It was enormous. It filled his chest and his throat and his eyes. It shook him, and for a few minutes he was nothing but grief. Not a person with a job and responsibilities and a plan for the day. Just grief. Pure and honest and raw. And then something happened that he did not expect. As the wave began to recede, as it always does, he was not left feeling empty. He was left feeling tender, open. And in that openness, something welled up that was different from sadness. It was a feeling of warmth, of goodness, of gratitude, not the kind he had been trying to force on himself, but the kind that comes naturally when the heart is unguarded. He thought of his father, and instead of the sharp ache of absence, he felt something gentler, something like closeness, as if, in allowing himself to grieve fully, he had somehow moved closer to the very thing he was missing. Over time, this became a pattern. Each wave of grief, when he met it honestly and let it move through him, left behind a residue of love. Not the love of having someone here to call on a Sunday morning. Something quieter than that. Something that did not depend on the phone ringing. A love that seemed to live in the air itself, in the garden, in the quality of light on a particular kind of morning. He began to understand, not as a concept but as a lived experience, that the love had not left when his father did. It had only changed form. There is a beautiful truth hidden in the word grief that the Buddhist teachings help us see. We would not grieve if we had not loved. Grief and love are not separate things. They are made of the same material. When we feel the ache of someone's absence, what we are actually feeling is the love we shared with them, pressing against the walls of a container that can no longer hold it in the old familiar shape. Think of it this way. Imagine a river that has been flowing between two banks for many years. The water has shaped itself to the banks, and the banks have shaped themselves to the water. They have grown together. They know each other intimately. And then one day, one of the banks is gone. The water does not stop flowing. It cannot stop flowing. That is its nature. But it rushes and churns and spills over because the shape it knew, the form that held it, has changed. That churning, that spilling over, is grief. And the water itself is love. It has not gone anywhere. It has not diminished. It is simply looking for a new shape. And in time, gently and naturally, it finds one. The love that was once held by the presence of another person begins to flow into new channels. Into kindness, into compassion, into a deeper appreciation for the people still in our lives, into a more tender relationship with our own hearts. The love does not vanish. It transforms. The Buddha taught that attachment, the desire for things to stay as they are, is one of the roots of suffering. And this is true. But it is important to understand what this teaching does not mean. It does not mean that we should not love. It does not mean that we should hold ourselves at a distance from the people in our lives to avoid the pain of losing them. That would be a misunderstanding of the teaching, and it would be a very cold and lonely way to live. What the teaching means, gently and with great compassion, is that the love itself is not the cause of suffering. The love is beautiful, and it is real, and it is one of the most precious things we will ever know. What causes suffering is the belief that love requires the physical presence of another person to survive. That when the person goes, the love goes with them. But it does not. This is what the man in our story discovered. This is what so many people, in so many traditions, across so many centuries, have found when they were brave enough to let their grief move through them without resistance. The love stays. It changes shape. It becomes something quieter, something more expansive. But it does not leave. It is as if there is a place inside each of us, a warm and glowing place, like a hearth in the center of a home, where everyone we have ever truly loved still lives. Not as a memory exactly. Memories are pictures in the mind, and they can fade. This is something different. This is a presence, a warmth, a felt sense that the connection is still alive, not in the old way, but in a way that is, if anything, more vast. There is a passage from an old contemplative poet that speaks to this with great tenderness. He writes about the nature of grief as a kind of journey. He describes those days when happiness returns briefly, and you feel yourself stepping back into the fullness of life, only to be pulled under again by a sudden wave of loss. He speaks of how hard it becomes to trust yourself, because you never know when the next wave will come. There is something deeply relieving about knowing that someone else has walked this path before you and found words for what you are feeling. That the ambush of grief in the middle of an ordinary day, the way it can knock you sideways when you thought you were standing on solid ground, is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is simply part of the journey. A journey that millions of human hearts have walked before yours and will walk after. But then this poet says something remarkable. He says that if you stay with the process, if you let grief do its work without rushing it, something begins to happen. Gradually, slowly, in its own good time, you begin to sense the presence of the one you have lost, not in the old, physical way, but in a new way, a more subtle way, as if they have moved from the room beside you to a room within you. You feel them in the quality of your own tenderness, in the way your heart has become more gentle because of having loved them, in the things you notice now that you might never have noticed before, because loving them taught you to see the world differently. And when the work of grief has been done, he writes, when the tears have been allowed to fall and the ache has been honored, and the honesty has been complete, the wound of loss begins to heal, and you discover that you can enter the hearth in your own soul, that warm and luminous place at the center of your being, and find that your loved one has been there, waiting for you all along. This is not wishful thinking. This is the testimony of countless human hearts across centuries of experience, and it does not require any particular belief system or spiritual practice. It only requires a willingness to grieve honestly, to let the waves come, to let them move through, and to trust that what is left behind when the water recedes is not emptiness, but love. Now, it is important to say something gentle here, because the path of grief is not a straight line. It is not a journey with a clear beginning, middle, and end. It spirals. It circles back. You may think you have arrived at peace, and then a year later, or 5 years later, you hear a certain song, and the wave comes again, and you are right back in the middle of it. And that is perfectly all right. In the Zen tradition, there is a saying, fall down 7 times, get up 8. This is usually understood as a teaching about perseverance, but it can also be understood as a teaching about grief. The waves will knock you down. That is what waves do. And each time, you will get back up. Not because you are strong, though you may be, but because life itself has a way of lifting us, if we let it. The key phrase there is, if we let it. Because the one thing that can make grief unbearable is not the grief itself, but the resistance to it. The clenching, the turning away, the telling ourselves that we should be over this by now, that we should be stronger, that there is something wrong with us for still feeling this way. There is nothing wrong with you for grieving. There is nothing wrong with you for missing someone. There is nothing wrong with you for crying at unexpected moments, or for feeling a sudden pang of loss when you thought you were doing fine. This is your heart doing exactly what hearts are designed to do. It is loving. And love, as we have been exploring tonight, does not follow a timetable. The Buddha said, you yourself, as much as anyone in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. And this is perhaps the most important thing to remember in the midst of grief. To be kind to yourself, to let the process take as long as it takes, to trust that the heart knows what it is doing, even when the mind does not understand. There is one more thing to say about the hearth in the soul, and it is this. You do not have to wait until the grieving is complete to feel its warmth. Even in the middle of a wave, even in the hardest moments, there are flickers. Small moments of grace. A memory that makes you smile through tears. A feeling of closeness that comes out of nowhere. A sudden, unexpected sense that everything is, somehow, all right. These are not illusions. These are glimpses of the truth that lives beneath the surface of grief. The truth that love is still here. That connection is still real. That the hearth is lit, and it is warm, and it is waiting for you. There is a story told among contemplatives about a woman who was deep in mourning. She had lost someone very close to her, and for weeks she had been wrapped in the heaviness of grief. One morning, she stepped outside her door and saw a small bird sitting on the garden wall, singing. It was an ordinary bird, an ordinary song, nothing remarkable at all. And yet, in that moment, she felt something crack open in her chest, and through the crack, light poured in. She stood there weeping, not from sadness, but from something she could not quite name. It was as if the bird's song had reached past her grief and touched the place where her love still lived. And in that touch, she knew, she absolutely knew, that nothing real had been lost. The form had changed, yes, but the love was still singing. She went back inside and made herself a cup of tea, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something like peace. Not the absence of grief, but peace, and grief living side by side, like two old friends who have learned to share a room. This is what becomes possible when we let grief do its work. Not a life without sadness, but a life where sadness and love and peace can all coexist. A life that is wider than we thought it could be. A life where the hearth is always burning and the door is always open. You will find your way there. Not by rushing, not by forcing, not by doing anything at all, but simply by allowing, by being honest, by letting the waves come and go, and trusting that the shore is solid beneath your feet. As an ancient Buddhist verse reminds us, nothing is forever except change. The grief will change, the missing will change, and what remains, what always remains, is the love. Let us rest here for a moment. Take a slow breath and let it out gently. And when you feel ready, we will walk on together. If someone were to ask you, right now, in this quiet moment, what you most deeply long for, what would you say? Not what you want for dinner, or what you hope happens at work next week. Something deeper than that. Something that lives beneath all the daily wanting and planning and hoping. A longing that has been with you for as long as you can remember, even if you have never quite found the words for it. The old Buddhist teachers had a name for this. They called it the holy longing, and they believed it was not a sign of something missing in your life, but a sign of something already present in your heart. A kind of compass pointing you home. There is a simple reflection that has been practiced in monasteries and retreat centers for a very long time. It goes like this. You sit quietly. You let yourself settle. And then you imagine, as gently as you can, that your time here is very short. Not in a frightening way. More in the way you might watch the last few minutes of a beautiful sunset, knowing it is nearly over, feeling the preciousness of the light that remains. And in that imagining, you ask yourself one question. What is it that I most want to feel, to know, to trust in these final moments? Not what you want to accomplish, not what you want to say to someone else. Just this, in the quiet of your own heart, what matters most? When groups of people are invited to sit with this question, something remarkable happens. The answers, though they come in many different words, almost always point in the same direction. Some people say, presence, just to be fully here, fully awake, not lost in thought or worry, but right here, in this moment. Some say, love, to feel love, to know love, to rest in the warmth of it. Others say, peace, a deep, still peace that does not depend on anything going a particular way. Some say, gratitude, to feel the fullness of everything that has been given. And many say something about connection, about feeling their place in the larger web of life, about sensing that they belong to something vast and tender, and that this belonging is real. What is beautiful about these answers is not just what they say, but what they do not say. No one, when they sit with this question honestly, says they wish they had worked more hours. No one says they wish they had worried more, or argued more, or spent more time trying to control things. No one says they wish they had been right more often. When the masks fall away, when the busyness drops, when we allow ourselves to touch the bedrock of what we truly care about, it is always something simple, something quiet, something that has been waiting patiently beneath the noise of our lives, the way a stone waits at the bottom of a stream. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "The most precious gift we can offer anyone is our attention." When mindfulness embraces those we love, they will bloom like flowers. And what the reflection we just described reveals is that this gift, this quality of full, loving attention, is not only the most precious thing we can offer others, it is also the thing we most want for ourselves. Beneath everything, beneath all the striving and the achieving and the worrying, what we long for is simply to be present, to be here, to feel the life that is moving through us right now, and to know that it is enough. This is what the Buddhist tradition calls coming home. Not going somewhere new, but arriving where we have always been. Waking up to what has always been true. It is a homecoming that does not require a journey. You do not need to travel to a distant monastery or sit in meditation for 20 years, though those things are beautiful in their own way. The homecoming can happen in an instant. It can happen right now, listening to these words, feeling the weight of your body where it rests, noticing the temperature of the air on your skin. Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment where, for no particular reason, everything felt suddenly, perfectly, enough. Where the restlessness dropped away and you were simply here, and here was wonderful. Perhaps it happened on a walk. Perhaps it happened while sitting with a friend in comfortable silence. Perhaps it happened in the middle of something so ordinary you would never think to mention it to anyone. Those moments are not rare. They are happening all the time. We just miss most of them because we are somewhere else in our minds, worrying about the future or replaying the past. The holy longing is the part of us that knows this, that knows we are missing something beautiful, and that is gently, patiently calling us back. There is a lovely image for this. Imagine a fish swimming through the ocean, searching desperately for water. The fish swims faster and faster, looking everywhere, growing more and more anxious. Where is the water? The fish asks. I must find the water. And of course, the water is everywhere. The fish is already in it, has always been in it, could not be separate from it if it tried. This is our situation too. The presence we long for, the love we seek, the peace we chase after, these are not things we need to find or create or earn. They are already here. They are the very medium we live in. We are swimming in them right now. The only thing that keeps us from feeling this is our own busyness, our own thinking, our own habit of looking everywhere except right here. There is a teaching in the Zen tradition that says, sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes, and the grass grows by itself. It is such a simple image, and yet it holds a world of wisdom. The grass does not strain to grow. It does not make a plan. It does not worry about whether it is growing fast enough or in the right direction. It simply opens to the sun and the rain, and growth happens on its own. We are like the grass, more than we know. When we stop striving and allow ourselves to be nourished by what is already here, by this breath, by this moment, by this quiet awareness that is always present beneath our thoughts, something in us begins to grow. Not because we forced it, but because we finally got out of the way. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a woman who had lived a very full and active life. She was the kind of person who was always moving, always doing. She ran her household with great energy. She was involved in her community. She had opinions and projects and plans stretching out ahead of her as far as she could see. And then, one autumn, she fell ill. Not seriously at first, but enough that she had to slow down. And then slow down more. And then, to her great frustration, stop almost entirely. For the first weeks, she was restless and irritated. She lay in bed making lists of all the things she needed to do when she got better. She called friends and gave instructions. She worried about everything that was not getting done in her absence. But the illness did not lift. Weeks became months. And slowly, almost against her will, something began to change. She described it later to a friend this way. At first, I thought I was losing everything. My energy, my projects, my way of being in the world. I felt like a tree being stripped of its leaves. And I fought it. I fought it hard. She paused. But then one morning, I woke up very early. The house was still. The light was just beginning to come through the window. And I heard a bird singing outside. Just one bird. And it was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. I lay there listening, and I realized I was crying. Not because I was sad, because I was actually here. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time in my life, I was not planning or doing or fixing. I was just here, listening to a bird, and it was the most alive I had ever felt. She shook her head gently, still amazed by it. All those years of running around, and the thing I was running toward was right here the whole time. I just had to get still enough to feel it. Her friend asked her if the illness had been worth it for that realization. She thought about it for a long time. I would not wish it on anyone, she said, but I would not trade what I found for anything. It is as if I had been living in a beautiful house my whole life, but I had never once sat down in it. I was always rushing from room to room, rearranging the furniture, fixing things, adding things. And then one day I was forced to just sit down. And I looked around and I thought, oh, this is lovely. This has been lovely all along. This woman had discovered something that the great teachers have spoken about for centuries. That stillness is not the absence of life. It is the very heart of it. It is the place where life is most vivid, most real, most deeply felt. There is a beautiful verse attributed to the Buddha that says, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment." And what makes this teaching so powerful is not that it asks us to do something extraordinary. It asks us to do the most ordinary thing in the world, to be where we are, to feel what we feel, to hear the bird that is singing right now, the one that has been singing all along, if only we had ears to hear it. Let us sit with this a little longer, because there is something else hidden in the holy longing that deserves our attention. When people are asked what they would most want to feel in their final moments, many of them say some version of belonging, the sense of being connected to something larger than themselves, of being part of a great web of life that includes not just the people they know, but all people, all beings, the trees, the rivers, the stars. This is not a vague or sentimental feeling. It is one of the most concrete and grounding experiences a human being can have. And the Buddhist tradition has a very specific understanding of it. It teaches that the sense of being a separate self, an isolated individual moving through a world of other isolated individuals, is actually a kind of illusion. Not that you are not real. You are real. Your feelings are real. Your experiences are real. But the hard boundary you feel between yourself and everything else, the sense that you end at your skin and the rest of the world begins on the other side, this is something the mind constructs. It is not the deepest truth. The deepest truth, according to the teachings, is that we are woven into the fabric of life in ways we can barely begin to comprehend. Every breath you take connects you to the trees that made the air. Every bite of food connects you to the soil that grew it, and the hands that harvested it, and the rain that watered it. You are, in the most literal sense, made of everything else. And everything else is, in some small way, made of you. When we feel the holy longing for belonging, we are feeling the tug of this truth. We are feeling our own nature calling us back to what is real. And when we honor that longing, even for a moment, the walls of separation thin. The boundaries soften, and we find ourselves resting in a warmth that is not ours alone. It is shared. It is vast. It is the warmth of life itself, recognizing itself in us. This is the paradox that the Buddhist teachings point to again and again. We spend so much of our lives in motion, searching for something we call happiness, something we call peace, something we call fulfillment. And the motion itself, the constant searching, is the very thing that keeps us from finding it. The Buddha described this with a metaphor that is both simple and profound. He said that our minds are like a glass of muddy water. When we keep stirring the glass, when we keep agitating it with our thoughts and our wanting and our planning, the water stays cloudy. We cannot see through it. But if we simply set the glass down and let it be still, the mud settles on its own, and what is left is clear water. It was always clear water. The clarity was always there. It just needed us to stop stirring. This is not a teaching about doing nothing. The Buddhist path is not about withdrawing from life or becoming passive. It is about recognizing that beneath all our activity, there is a stillness that is always present, and that this stillness is not empty. It is full. It is full of exactly the things we long for most: presence, warmth, love, peace, the feeling of belonging to something larger than our small, busy selves. Let us return for a moment to the holy longing we spoke of earlier, because there is something important to understand about it. This longing, this deep pull toward presence and love and connection, is not a weakness. It is not a sign that something is wrong with you or that your life is lacking something essential. It is actually a sign of your deepest wisdom. It is your heart's way of remembering what is true. In the Buddhist tradition, it is taught that our essential nature is awareness and love. That beneath all the layers of personality and habit and fear, there is a vast, open, luminous quality that is who we really are. And the holy longing is simply the pull of that nature, calling us back to itself. The way a river is always pulled toward the sea, even when it winds and bends and seems to lose its way. You have felt this longing. Everyone has. It is the feeling you get when you watch a sunset and something in your chest opens wide. It is the feeling of holding a sleeping child and sensing that this moment is sacred. It is the ache of beauty that sometimes catches you off guard, when a piece of music, or a line of poetry, or even just the way the light falls through a window, stops you in your tracks and makes you want to weep for reasons you cannot explain. That ache is not sadness. It is recognition. It is your heart recognizing its own nature, its own vastness, its own belonging to something that words can never quite capture. The 13th century Sufi poet who wrote about this longing said it beautifully. He said, "What you seek is seeking you." And this is the same truth that the Buddhist tradition teaches. The love you are looking for is looking for you. The peace you are chasing is already chasing you. The presence you long to feel is already present, waiting for you to stop running long enough to notice. There is a reason why this reflection, this imagining of our final moments, is so powerful. It is not because it is morbid or frightening. It is because it cuts through everything that does not matter and leaves only what does. When we imagine that our time is very short, the mind stops making lists. The mind stops worrying about next week and next month and next year. And for just a moment, we drop into the present, into this breath, into this heartbeat, into the living warmth of being here. And we discover that this is what we wanted all along. Not more time, not more achievements, not more of anything, really. Just this aliveness, this tenderness, this quiet, shimmering awareness of being a part of something beautiful and vast and passing. The Buddha said, "The trouble is, you think you have time." And this is not a harsh teaching. It is a tender one. It is a gentle nudge from a wise friend who is saying, do not wait. Do not postpone the living. Do not save your love for some better moment. This is the moment. This is the one. And when we truly hear this, even for an instant, something in us relaxes. The shoulders drop. The jaw softens. The breath deepens. And we find ourselves here, in the only place we have ever actually been, feeling the only thing that has ever truly mattered. Home. We are already home. Let us rest here for a breath. Feel the quiet of this moment, and whenever you are ready, we will walk on together. There is an old verse that a beloved poet once wrote. She said that everything she had ever learned in her lifetime led back to one thing, that there is a dark river of loss in this life, and that on the other side of that river is a kind of salvation. She did not mean salvation in a grand or dramatic way. She meant something quieter, something closer to what happens when you have been walking through a long dark wood, and then, slowly, the trees begin to thin, and light starts to come through, and you realize that the darkness was not the end of the story. It was the passage. This is one of the deepest teachings in the Buddhist tradition, that the things we most want to turn away from, the losses, the changes, the letting go that life asks of us again and again, these are not obstacles on the path to peace. They are the path itself. Most of the world's most beautiful creations have come from this truth. The poems that move us most are rarely written by people who had everything go their way. They are written by people who were broken open by something they did not choose, and who found, in that openness, a tenderness and a clarity they did not know they had. The melodies that bring tears to our eyes were not composed in comfort. They were composed by people who had felt deeply, who had lost something precious, and who discovered that the only way to honor what they had lost was to turn it into something beautiful. Even the natural world teaches us this. The lotus flower, which is one of the most sacred symbols in Buddhism, does not grow in rich, comfortable soil. It grows in the mud. in the thick, dark, murky bottom of a pond, and it rises through the water, through all that heaviness and darkness, to bloom on the surface in extraordinary beauty. The Buddha often used the lotus as an image for the human heart, not because the heart avoids the mud, but because it knows how to grow through it. And this is something worth remembering on those days when life feels particularly heavy, when the mud feels thick, when we wonder if anything beautiful could possibly come from what we are going through. The lotus does not bloom in spite of the mud. It blooms because of it. The darkness and the difficulty are not separate from the beauty. They are the soil in which it grows. There is a simplicity to this teaching that can be easy to miss. We do not need to go looking for difficulty. Life provides more than enough. But when difficulty finds us, as it always will, we have a choice about how we meet it. We can clench against it and try to push it away. Or we can allow ourselves to be in it, fully, honestly, the way the lotus allows itself to be in the mud, knowing that something in us knows how to grow toward the light. There is something that happens to people when they stop resisting the difficult parts of their lives. Not when they give up or collapse into despair. That is something different. But when they find a way to meet what is hard with a kind of open, unguarded presence. Something softens. Something shines through. You have probably seen this in someone you know. Perhaps it was an elderly relative who, in their later years, became gentler and more radiant than they had ever been when they were younger and busier and more defended. Perhaps it was a friend who went through a very difficult time and came out of it not bitter, but somehow more beautiful, more real, more present. There is a quality that appears in people who have been through the fire of loss and have let it do its work. It is hard to describe, but you know it when you see it. A kind of transparency, as if the layers of pretense and self-protection have been gently burned away, and what remains is something luminous. The Zen tradition has a phrase for this. It speaks of the true face, the face we had before we learned to wear masks. And it teaches that this true face is not something we need to create. It is something that is revealed when the masks are set down. The fire of loss, when met with presence, has a way of helping us set them down. Let us explore a story that carries this teaching beautifully. There was a woman who had a complicated relationship with her father. He was, by all accounts, a formidable man, successful in his work, respected by his colleagues, the kind of person who could fill a room with the force of his personality. He had strong opinions, and he expressed them freely, sometimes more freely than those around him might have wished. But there was something else in him, something quieter, that his daughter had always sensed but had never quite been able to reach. It was as if there were two versions of her father, the one the world saw, who was confident and commanding, and sometimes a little intimidating, and another one who lived somewhere deeper, behind the public face, who was tender and uncertain and full of a love he did not quite know how to express. For most of her life, she had known only the first version. Their conversations tended to stay on the surface. He would share his views on things, and she would listen, and there was a kind of distance between them that neither of them knew how to close. And then he became ill. It was not sudden. It happened gradually, over the course of some months, and as his body slowed and his world grew smaller, something extraordinary began to happen. The layers started to come off. She noticed it first in the way he looked at her. There was a softness in his eyes that she had not seen before, a kind of openness. as if the walls he had spent a lifetime building had quietly begun to dissolve. One afternoon, she was sitting beside his bed, and they were talking in a way they never had before. Not about opinions or projects or the news. About real things. About feelings. About what mattered. She asked him a question that she had always wanted to ask but had never found the courage to. She said, "Of everything you have done in your life, what do you feel was the contribution that mattered most? What made your life feel worthwhile?" She expected him to name one of his professional achievements. He had many to choose from. Awards, recognitions, projects that had been celebrated widely. But he simply smiled, a gentle smile, and he said, very quietly, "You, of course." She sat there, unable to speak. In her entire life, she could not recall hearing words like that from him. Not once. And yet here they were, offered as simply and naturally as if he had been saying them all along. "All the rest of it," he said, looking out the window at the garden, "was just noise, really. You were always the thing that was real." There is something in this story that illuminates a truth the Buddhist teachers have been pointing to for thousands of years. The Buddha said, "In the end, these things matter most. How well did you love? How fully did you live? How deeply did you let go?" And what we see in this Father's transformation is a living answer to that question. For most of his life, he had been holding on to his image, his reputation, his way of being in the world. These are not bad things. They are simply the masks that most of us wear to move through our days. But they are masks, and they take energy to maintain, and they keep us at a distance from the people we love. When the masks began to fall away, what was left was not weakness. It was the opposite. What was left was the strongest, truest, most real thing about him. His love for his daughter, simple, quiet, and as steady as the ground beneath their feet. His daughter later described those final weeks as a gift she had not expected and did not feel she deserved. "I met a version of my father that I had always suspected was there," she said, "but had never before been allowed to know." It was as if, in letting go of everything else, he finally became who he really was. What she meant by this is worth lingering on, because it touches something important. For most of his life, her father had been performing, not dishonestly, not with any intention to deceive, but in the way that most of us perform every day, putting forward the version of ourselves that we think the world needs to see. The competent version, the confident version, the one who has it all figured out. There is nothing wrong with this. It is how we navigate a complex world. But it comes at a cost. The cost is that the truest, softest, most vulnerable parts of ourselves get pushed into the background. They are still there. They are always there. But they do not get much light or air. What happened to this man, in his final chapter, is that the performance simply became too much effort to maintain. Not because he decided to drop it. It dropped on its own, the way a tree drops its leaves when autumn comes. It was simply time. And what was revealed beneath, what his daughter saw when she looked into those newly soft eyes, was not weakness. It was beauty. The raw, unadorned beauty of a human heart with nothing left to prove. She said something else that has stayed with many who heard her tell this story. She said, "In those last weeks, my father was more himself than he had ever been. And I realized that I had been waiting my entire life to meet him." This is the fire we are speaking of tonight. Not a destructive fire, not a fire that takes things away for no reason, but a refining fire, a fire that gently warms what is frozen, that melts what has been held too tightly, and reveals what was always underneath. In the ancient traditions, gold was purified by fire. The raw ore, full of impurities, was placed in the flame, and the heat would separate what was precious from what was not. What emerged was pure gold, not something new, something that was always there, hidden within the ore, waiting to be revealed. This is what loss can do for us, when we let it. Not always, not automatically. There is nothing romantic about suffering, and it would be wrong to suggest that pain is always a gift. Sometimes pain is just pain, and what it needs is gentleness and care and rest. But there is a possibility within loss that the Buddhist teachings want us to know about. A possibility that when we stop running from what hurts, when we stop trying to keep everything under control, when we allow ourselves to be softened instead of hardened by what life brings, something luminous begins to shine through the cracks. There is a well-known Zen saying, "The crack is where the light gets in." And this is exactly what we are talking about. The places where we have been broken open are not flaws. They are openings, windows through which a deeper truth can finally be seen and felt. This teaching is not just about the large losses of life. It is also about the small, daily letting go that every day asks of us. The morning that does not go as planned. The conversation that takes an unexpected turn. The small disappointments and the gentle surprises. Each one is an invitation, a very quiet invitation, to practice the same thing, meeting what is here with an open heart. There is a story told among Zen students about a teacher who was known for his remarkable calm. No matter what happened, he seemed to meet it with the same gentle, steady presence. One day a student asked him his secret. "How do you remain so peaceful?" the student asked. "When things go wrong." The teacher considered this for a moment. Then he picked up a teacup from the table beside him. "Do you see this cup?" he said. "Yes," the student replied. "I enjoy this cup very much," the teacher said. "I drink my tea from it every morning. I admire the way the light catches its glaze. I am grateful for it." He paused. "But in my heart, the cup is already broken." The student looked confused. "I do not mean that I expect it to break," the teacher explained gently. "I mean that I have already made peace with the fact that it will. Everything that takes form will one day change form. Knowing this does not make me love the cup less. It makes me love it more, because I am not holding on to it. I am simply enjoying it, fully, while it is here." The student sat with this for a long while, turning the words over in his mind. And then he understood. The teacher was not speaking about a cup at all. He was speaking about everything. Every friendship, every season, every morning, every conversation, every single beautiful temporary thing that makes up a human life. When we know that something is passing, we pay attention to it. We take it in fully. We do not postpone our appreciation for some other time. And in that full, present, ungrasping attention, there is a kind of freedom, a lightness, a joy that is not shadowed by fear, because there is nothing to lose. There is only this moment, and this moment, and this moment, each one complete in itself. This is what the Buddha meant when he said, "Every morning we are born again." What we do today is what matters most. Not because yesterday did not matter, not because tomorrow will not come, but because today is the only day we can actually live. And to live it fully, with open eyes and an open heart, is the greatest gift we can give ourselves and everyone around us. This is the essence of the teaching. Not to live in fear of loss, not to protect ourselves from caring, but to love fully, freely, with open hands, knowing that everything is passing and that this very passing is what makes each moment so incredibly precious. And so we return to where we began, to that image of the dark river that the poet described, with salvation on the other side. The river is real. It flows through every life. None of us will be spared the experience of loss. But what the Buddhist tradition offers us, with great gentleness and great confidence, is this: you can cross the river. You do not have to be swept away by it. And on the other side, you will find something you did not expect. Not the absence of feeling, not some cold, detached serenity, but a warmth so deep and so vast that it can hold everything. The joy and the sorrow, the hello and the goodbye, the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows, all of it held in an embrace that is wider than anything your small, worried self could have imagined. The old teachers sometimes describe this warmth as a great sky. The clouds come and go, is less than #0. 5 is greater than some are dark and heavy. Some are light and bright. But the sky itself is never damaged by the clouds. It holds them all, and it remains vast and open and blue behind everything that passes through it. You are that sky. You have always been that sky. The losses are the clouds. They come. They are real. They may be heavy for a time, but they are not the whole of you. They are not even close to the whole of you. This is what the father in our story found in the last light of his days. This is what his daughter received as a gift she will carry for the rest of her life. This is what the lotus knows as it rises through the darkness toward the light. And it is what is available to each of us whenever we are ready to stop running and let the fire do its gentle, ancient work. The Buddha said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." And in the context of everything we have explored tonight, this teaching takes on a very tender meaning. The peace is not somewhere else. It is not on the other side of a problem being solved, or a loss being avoided, or a future being secured. It is here, in this breath, in this heartbeat, in the willingness to be present with whatever this moment holds. And that willingness, gentle as it is the bravest thing any of us will ever do. Let us pause gently here. There is no hurry. Just rest in whatever is present for you. And when you feel ready, we will continue on together. Have you ever watched a small child at the beach trying to hold onto a wave? The water rushes in, all sparkle and foam, and the child bends down and cups their hands around it. They squeeze tight. They try so hard to keep it. And of course the water slips through their fingers every single time. And the child looks at their empty hands with such surprise, as if they truly believed that this time it would stay. We smile when we see this, because we know something the child has not yet learned. Water cannot be held, not by squeezing, not by wanting, not by any amount of effort or cleverness. And yet, if we are honest with ourselves, we spend much of our adult lives doing exactly the same thing. trying to hold on to moments that are already passing, trying to keep things from changing, trying to grip the wave. The Buddha saw this very clearly. He said, "You only lose what you cling to, not what you love, not what you enjoy, what you cling to." And the difference between loving something and clinging to it is one of the most important things we can ever learn. There is a deep pattern woven into human nature, and it runs like a current beneath nearly everything we do. When something pleasant happens, we reach for it. We want more of it. We want it to last. And when something unpleasant happens, we push it away. We resist it. We tighten against it. We do whatever we can to make it stop. This pattern is so automatic, so deeply built into us, that most of the time we do not even notice it happening. It is like the hum of a refrigerator in a quiet house. It has been running so long that we have stopped hearing it. But it is there, and it is running all the time. When we get a piece of good news, there is a reaching, a grasping, a desire to lock it in and keep it safe. When we get a piece of difficult news, there is a flinching, a tightening in the belly or the chest, a pulling away. These are not choices we make. They are reflexes. They happen before we have time to think about them. And here is the thing. These reflexes, innocent as they are the root of most of our suffering. Not the events themselves, not the good news or the difficult news, but the grasping and the pushing away, the desperate attempt to control what cannot be controlled. The Buddha called this tanha, which is sometimes translated as craving or thirst. But a gentler way to think of it is simply this. It is the habit of wanting things to be different from the way they are. And it is exhausting. Think about it for a moment. How much of your energy on any given day goes toward wanting things to be different? Wanting the traffic to move faster, wanting the weather to be warmer, wanting the ache in your neck to go away, wanting the person in front of you in line to hurry up, wanting the weekend to come sooner, wanting. None of these individual wants is a problem. They are natural. They are human. But taken together, they create a kind of background tension that we carry with us everywhere. A quiet, constant straining against the way things actually are. And this straining, more than any single event or difficulty, is what wears us down. There is a wonderful old saying, "You can argue with reality as much as you want, but you will lose every time." And this is not a harsh truth. It is actually a freeing one. Because the moment you stop arguing with what is, the moment you set down the fight, something in you exhales. Something relaxes. And you find that you have energy you did not know you had, because you are no longer spending it all on resistance. Let us explore a story that shows this pattern in action. It is an old tale, and it has been told in many forms, but the version we will share tonight has been softened and simplified, because the teaching it carries is more important than any of its details. There was once a builder who was working alone on a tall structure high above the ground. He was a careful man, good at his trade, and he had spent the day carrying materials up and down, brick by brick, doing his work with steady hands. When he finished for the day, he discovered that he had a great deal of leftover material on the roof, far too much to carry down by hand. So he devised a plan. He attached a large barrel to a rope that hung over the side of the building, loaded the extra material into the barrel, and then went back down to the ground to lower it gently. Now, here is where the trouble began. The barrel, loaded with all that weight, was much heavier than the builder himself. So when he untied the rope from the ground, instead of lowering the barrel slowly, he found himself being lifted into the air. He was so startled that he gripped the rope tighter. And up he went, rising fast, while the heavy barrel came rushing down. Somewhere in the middle they passed each other. It was not a gentle meeting. When the barrel hit the ground, it broke open and all the weight spilled out. Now the barrel was light and the builder was heavy, so down he came, fast, while the empty barrel shot back up. Again they met in the middle. Again it was not pleasant. He landed hard on the pile of loose material. He was bruised and sore and dazed. And as he lay there, looking up at the empty barrel swinging high above him, he did the one thing that guaranteed the whole cycle would repeat itself. He let go of the rope. The barrel came down once more. Now, this story is not really about a builder or a barrel. It is about what happens when we react to life from a place of panic rather than presence. Think about the builder's experience for a moment. At every stage, he was reacting to the last thing that happened. He gripped the rope because he was startled. He held on because he was afraid. He let go because he was overwhelmed. And each reaction created the next problem, which created the next reaction, which created the next problem, in an endless chain. This is exactly what happens inside us, many times a day, though usually in less dramatic fashion. Something happens that we did not expect. The body tenses. The mind starts spinning. We grab onto a thought, a plan, a strategy, anything to feel like we are in control. And that grabbing creates its own kind of tension, which creates its own kind of problem, which we then try to solve with more grabbing. It is like a person caught in quicksand. The more they struggle, the deeper they sink. Not because the quicksand is malicious. It is just the nature of things. Struggling against what is only pulls us deeper into it. And this chain reaction does not just happen with the big things. It happens with the small things too. Someone says something that stings, and before we know it, we are replaying the conversation in our heads for the third time, rehearsing what we should have said, imagining the next encounter, building a whole world of tension and resentment out of a single offhand remark. Or we make a mistake, a small one, and the mind seizes it and turns it over and over, examining it from every angle, asking why we did it, what it means about us, what other people must think. One small stone dropped in the pond, and the ripples just keep going. The Zen teachers call this the monkey mind. The mind that swings from branch to branch, never resting, always reaching for the next thing, always reacting to the last thing. It is not that the monkey is bad. The monkey is just afraid. And when we are afraid, we grip. But here is the gentle truth that the Buddhist teachings offer us. We do not have to keep riding the rope. We can step off the cycle, not by forcing ourselves to let go, because as we have seen, forced letting go often just creates more chaos, but by something much simpler and much kinder, by noticing. There is a beautiful simplicity to the practice of noticing. It does not require strength or willpower or years of training. It just requires a moment of honesty. A moment where, instead of reacting to what is happening, we pause and notice that we are reacting. Oh, I am gripping. Oh, my shoulders are up around my ears. Oh, my mind is spinning through all the things that could go wrong. Oh, I am trying to control something that cannot be controlled. Just that. Just noticing. And in that noticing, something remarkable happens. The chain reaction slows down. Not because we forced it to stop, but because awareness itself has a quality of spaciousness. When we notice that we are gripping, there is a little bit of space between us and the gripping. We are no longer completely lost in it. We are watching it. And in that watching, the grip naturally begins to soften. The Buddha described this with great simplicity. He said, "Nothing can harm you as much as your own thoughts unguarded. Nothing can help you as much as your own thoughts when watched." And by watched, he did not mean analyzed or judged or fought with. He meant simply seen, noticed, held in gentle awareness. There is a world of difference between thinking, "I am afraid," and noticing, "Oh, fear is here." The first one traps you inside the fear. The second one gives you room to breathe. It is like the difference between being caught in a rainstorm and watching a rainstorm from a window. In both cases, the rain is real. But in one case, you are soaked and cold and miserable, and in the other, you are warm and dry and perhaps even enjoying the beauty of the rain. This does not mean we stand at a cold distance from our feelings. Not at all. We feel them fully. But we feel them with awareness, and that awareness is like the window. It lets us be with the rain without being lost in it. There is a verse from the Buddhist tradition that says, "Feelings come and go like clouds in a windy sky. Conscious breathing is my anchor." And this is a lovely way to think about it. The feelings are the clouds. They come and they go. Some are light, some are heavy, some are beautiful, some are dark. And through it all, there is something steady, something that does not blow away with the wind, something that is always here, watching, breathing, aware. That something is you, the real you, the you that is deeper than any feeling, wider than any thought, steadier than any storm. Let us explore another small story about this. There was a monk who was known for his quick temper. He tried very hard to be calm, as monks are expected to be, but the temper kept getting the better of him. Small things would set him off. A door left open, a meal served late, a student who asked the same question twice. One day, after a particularly sharp outburst, he went to his teacher and confessed that he was failing. "I have been meditating for years," he said, "and I still cannot control my anger. What am I doing wrong?" His teacher looked at him kindly and said, "You are trying to control your anger. That is what you are doing wrong." The monk was confused. "But is that not what I am supposed to do? Control it? Push it down? Make it go away?" "No," the teacher said. "You are supposed to notice it. When anger arises, you do not need to act on it. But you also do not need to fight it. Just notice it. Say to yourself, 'Oh, anger is visiting.' And then see what happens." "That is all?" the monk asked, doubtful. "That is all," the teacher said. "But that is everything." The monk tried this, and at first it did not seem to work. The anger still came. It still felt hot and urgent and real. But he noticed something subtle. When he simply acknowledged the anger without grabbing onto it or pushing it away, it behaved differently. It would arise, burn for a moment, and then, like a wave reaching the shore, it would begin to recede. On its own, without his having to do anything. Over time, the monk found that his temper did not exactly disappear. It still visited, but the visits became shorter because he was no longer adding fuel to the fire. He was no longer gripping the anger and shaking it and saying, "Why are you here? Go away." He was simply letting it be, with a kind of gentle curiosity, the way you might watch a rainstorm from the shelter of a porch. "The anger taught me something," he told his teacher later. "It taught me that I do not have to be at war with myself. I can just be here and let things pass through." His teacher smiled. "Now you are beginning to understand." This is one of the kindest teachings in all of Buddhism, that we do not need to be perfect. We do not need to have everything under control. We do not need to have conquered all our difficult feelings before we can find peace. We just need to be willing. There is a phrase that one of the old teachers used that has stayed with many who heard it. He said, "We cannot will letting go, but we can be willing." Can you feel the difference between those two things? To will letting go is an act of force. It is clenching your hand and then ordering yourself to unclench. It rarely works, and when it does, the clenching usually comes right back. But to be willing is something else entirely. Willingness is soft. It is an opening. It is not demanding that the hand unclench. It is simply saying, "I am ready. Whenever it is time, I am not going to force anything, but I am willing to let this soften in its own time, in its own way." Think of the difference between pushing a door open and simply unlocking it. When you push, you are using force, and the door might push back. When you unlock it, you are simply removing what was keeping it closed, and then the door opens on its own. Willingness is like turning the key. It does not do the opening. It creates the conditions for opening to happen. And this willingness, gentle as it sounds, is actually one of the most powerful forces in the human heart. Because willingness aligns us with the natural flow of things. It is like a leaf on a stream. The leaf does not have to try to move. It just has to stop resisting, and the water does the rest. There is a story about a Zen student who asked his teacher, "How long will it take me to find peace?" The teacher said, "If you try hard, it will take a very long time." "And if I try very, very hard?" The student asked. "Then it will take even longer," the teacher replied. The student was puzzled. "But surely the more effort I put in, the faster I will arrive." "No," the teacher said gently, "because what you are looking for is not at the end of effort. It is at the end of striving. It is what is already here when you stop trying so hard to get somewhere else." This is one of the sweetest paradoxes of the spiritual path. The peace we are seeking is not something we achieve through effort. It is something that reveals itself when we relax our effort, when we stop running and let ourselves arrive where we already are. The whole of the spiritual path, one wise teacher once said, is just letting go and letting go. Not once, not in one grand, heroic gesture, but again and again and again. Each moment, each day, each time we notice ourselves gripping, we gently, kindly, patiently let go one more time. Not because we have to, because we are willing. And in that willingness, there is a freedom that is sweeter than anything we could have held on to. As the Buddha gently reminded his students, in the end, only 3 things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. The letting go is not a single event. It is a way of living, a way of holding each day with open hands, the way you might hold a butterfly, firm enough to feel its wings, gentle enough to let it fly. Let us pause here for a moment. Let your body settle. Let your thoughts be still. And when you feel ready, we will continue on together. There is a teaching in the Buddhist tradition that begins with a very simple question. If someone shoots you with an arrow, does it hurt? Of course it does. But then the teaching asks a second question, and this is where it gets interesting. What if, after the first arrow strikes, you pick up a second arrow and drive it into the wound yourself? This sounds strange, of course. Who would do such a thing? And yet, as the Buddha gently pointed out, this is exactly what we do, many times a day, without even realizing it. The first arrow is the difficult thing that happens. The pain, the discomfort, the unwelcome news, the body not working the way we wish it would. This first arrow is part of being alive. It comes with the territory of having a body, of being human in a world that does not always bend to our wishes. But the second arrow is the one we add ourselves, and it is the one that causes the deeper ache. Let us sit with this teaching for a while, because it holds a great deal of gentleness within it, even though it begins with the image of an arrow. Imagine a very ordinary moment. You wake up in the morning and your body does not feel quite right. Perhaps there is a heaviness, or a stiffness, or a familiar ache that has been visiting for some time. This is the first arrow. It is simply what is happening. Sensations in the body. Unpleasant, yes. Unwelcome, certainly. But just sensations. Now, watch what the mind does next. Almost before you have finished noticing the sensations, the mind begins to tell a story about them. It might say, "This is never going to go away," or "This is going to get worse," or "I will not be able to do the things I love," or perhaps, and this one is very common, "Something is wrong with me. I must have done something to deserve this." These thoughts arrive so quickly, so automatically, that we rarely question them. They feel like facts, but they are not facts. They are stories. They are the second arrow. And unlike the first arrow, which we did not choose, the second arrow is one we can learn to recognize and, very gently, set down. This is not about pretending the body feels fine when it does not. It is not about forcing a smile when you are hurting. It is about noticing the difference between what is actually happening in this moment and what the mind is adding on top of it. Because often, what the mind adds is far heavier than the original experience. There is a woman who wrote a book about living with long-term illness. She had fallen sick and, after many months, had come to accept that she might not recover in the way she had hoped. Her body had changed, and it was not going to change back. At first, as you might expect, she struggled against this. She fought it. She searched for cures and strategies and explanations. She blamed herself. She blamed her habits. She lay awake at night constructing elaborate plans for how she would get better, and when the plans did not work, she constructed new plans, and when those did not work, she fell into despair. But then, slowly, something else began to happen. She began to notice the weather. Not the weather outside, though that was part of it too, She began to notice the weather of her own body. The way sensations would blow in like a gust of wind, strong and sharp, and then, if she waited, blow through and pass on. The way a morning of heaviness could give way to an afternoon of lightness. The way pain was not one solid, unchanging thing, but a constantly shifting pattern, like clouds moving across a wide sky. She described it this way: I used to think of my illness as a wall, something solid and permanent that was blocking my path. But when I started paying closer attention, I realized it was more like weather. It kept changing. There were storms, yes, but there were also clear skies, and the storms never lasted forever. This shift, from seeing her experience as a wall to seeing it as weather, changed everything for her. Not because the difficult days stopped coming. They did not. But because she stopped bracing against them as if they would last forever. She learned to ride them, the way a small boat rides the waves, knowing that the sea is always moving, always changing, and that no single wave is the whole ocean. She wrote about a particular afternoon that helped her understand this. She had been having a difficult morning. The heaviness was strong, and she had been lying on the couch, feeling the weight of it, when she noticed something. For just a moment, a brief moment, the heaviness lifted. Not entirely, but enough that she could feel a different quality in her body. Something lighter, something almost pleasant, and then it shifted again, and again. It was like watching clouds, she wrote. I had always thought of my experience as one long grey sky, but when I really looked, I could see the clouds were moving. Some were dark and heavy, some were thin and light, and between them there were patches of blue. I had just never noticed before, because I was so focused on the grey. This is a small thing, and yet it is not small at all. Because when we can see the patches of blue, when we can feel the moments of lightness between the moments of heaviness, something loosens in us. The experience is no longer solid. It is no longer a wall. It is weather, and weather, by its very nature, passes. There is something very liberating in this understanding. When we are in the middle of difficulty, especially physical difficulty, it is so easy to believe that this is how things are and how they will always be. The mind solidifies the experience. It takes a constellation of changing sensations, some pressing, some burning, some tingling, some aching, all of them in motion, all of them shifting from moment to moment, and it wraps them up in a single word, pain. And once that word is applied, something happens. The living, moving, breathing experience becomes a thing. A fixed, solid, immovable thing. And it is much harder to be at peace with a thing than it is to be at peace with weather. The Buddha understood this deeply. He taught that one of the great sources of suffering is our tendency to solidify experience, to take what is flowing and make it fixed, to take what is changing and tell ourselves it is permanent. And he offered a very simple, very gentle way out, to look more closely, to bring a kind of curious, friendly attention to what is actually happening, moment by moment, and to notice that it is never quite what we thought it was. If you have ever sat very still and paid careful attention to a sensation in your body, you may have noticed this for yourself. What seemed like one solid feeling turns out to be many small feelings, all moving and changing. There is pressing and then releasing, warmth and then coolness, tightness and then softening. It is like watching a kaleidoscope. The pattern is always turning, And there is a kind of rest in this, a kind of peace. Because when you are resting in the changing flow of experience, rather than bracing against a fixed idea of pain, the body relaxes, the mind quiets, and the experience, though it may still be unpleasant, becomes workable. It becomes something you can be with, rather than something you are fighting. But there is another layer to the second arrow that we should speak about, because it is one of the most tender and important parts of this teaching. And it has to do with how we treat ourselves when our bodies are struggling. When we are not feeling well, most of us, somewhere deep inside, begin to blame ourselves. We may not say it out loud. We may not even be fully aware of it. But there is a quiet voice that begins to whisper things like, if only I had taken better care of myself. If only I had eaten differently, or rested more, or worried less. This is somehow my fault. And then, because being unwell tends to make us more tired and more sensitive, and sometimes a little less patient, another layer of blame arrives. I am not handling this well. I am being too grumpy, too needy, too difficult. I should be stronger. I should be more graceful about this. This is the second arrow at its most painful. Because now, on top of the physical discomfort, there is a whole layer of shame. A feeling that the discomfort reveals something about who we are. That it means we are flawed, or weak, or not enough. The Buddha saw this pattern clearly, and he spoke about it with great compassion. He said that the first arrow, the unpleasant experience, is simply part of life. If you have a body, he taught, you will know discomfort. This is not a failure. This is not a punishment. This is simply the nature of having a body. But the second arrow, the blame, the shame, the story of a self that is somehow not okay, this is suffering that we add to ourselves. And it is optional. This does not mean it is our fault. Let us be very clear about that. Adding the second arrow is not a failure. It is a deeply human habit, built into us over thousands of years. Our minds evolved to look for threats, to find explanations, to assign cause and meaning. When something goes wrong in the body, the mind does what minds do. It looks for someone to blame. And when it cannot find anyone else, it turns on us. But knowing this, knowing that blame is a habit rather than a truth, can make all the difference. Because once you can see the second arrow as a second arrow, once you can say to yourself, gently, there it is. There is the blame. There is the story about not being good enough, then you are no longer completely caught inside it. You have a little space, a little room to breathe, a little room to be kind to yourself. The Buddha spoke about this with such tenderness. He said, you yourself, as much as anyone in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. And this is perhaps especially true when we are struggling physically, because that is when we are most vulnerable. That is when the inner critic tends to speak the loudest. And that is when we most need to meet ourselves with the same kindness we would offer a dear friend who was going through a hard time. Imagine a friend came to you and said, I have been feeling unwell, and I think it is my fault. I think I deserve it. I think I am not handling it well. What would you say to that friend? You would not agree with them. You would not add more blame. You would probably say something like, oh, sweetheart. No, you are doing the best you can. Being unwell is hard enough without beating yourself up about it. Please be gentle with yourself. This is what we are invited to say to ourselves, not just once, but as many times as we need to hear it. Let us explore a story about this kindness. There was a traveler who had been walking for many days through countryside and forest and over gentle hills. She was carrying a heavy pack, much heavier than she needed, because she had been adding things to it along the way. A stone here for something she regretted. A stone there for something she feared. A stone for each time she felt she had fallen short. By now, the pack was so heavy that every step was an effort, and the journey that had once felt like an adventure had become a trial. One evening, she came to a small inn at the edge of a village, and she sat down on the porch, exhausted. An old woman who ran the inn brought her a cup of tea and sat down beside her. "That is a very heavy pack," the old woman said, nodding at it. "It is," the traveler agreed, "and it gets heavier every day." "What is in it?" the old woman asked. The traveler hesitated. Then she said, "Stones, mostly." "Stones?" The old woman raised her eyebrows. "Why are you carrying stones?" "Because I picked them up along the way." Each one seemed important at the time. Each one felt like something I needed to carry. The old woman nodded slowly. She had seen many travelers come through with heavy packs. "May I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. If you set the pack down right here, right now, just for the length of time it takes to drink this tea, what is the worst thing that could happen?" The traveler thought about this. She looked at the pack. She looked at the tea. And then, very slowly, she shrugged the pack off her shoulders and set it on the ground beside her. The feeling was immediate. Her shoulders rose. Her back straightened. She took a breath, a real breath, the kind she had not been able to take in days. And she felt, for the first time in a long while, something like lightness. "How does that feel?" the old woman asked. "It feels wonderful," the traveler said, almost laughing. "But I cannot just leave the stones here. They are mine. They are my responsibilities." "I did not say leave them," the old woman replied gently. "I said set them down for the length of a cup of tea. You can always pick them up again. But perhaps, while you are resting, you might look at each stone and ask yourself, do I truly need to carry this one? Is it helping me on my journey? Or is it just making the road harder?" The traveler did this, and as she looked at each stone, one by one, she found that some of them had become so smooth and worn that she could no longer remember why she had picked them up. And some of them were not even real stones at all. They were worries about things that had never happened, blame for things that were never her fault, expectations she had placed on herself that no one else had asked of her. By the time she finished her tea, the pack was much lighter. Not empty. Some stones were worth carrying, but many were not, and the difference was remarkable. She thanked the old woman and continued on her way, and the road, which had felt so hard just an hour before, now felt almost pleasant under her feet. The trees were greener than she remembered. The air was sweeter. Her legs, though tired, moved with a lightness that surprised her. And the interesting thing was, the road had not changed at all. It was the same road, with the same hills and the same stones. What had changed was what she was carrying over it. There is a Zen teaching that goes like this: the obstacle is not the mountain. The obstacle is the idea that the mountain should not be there. When we apply this to the body, something tender emerges. The body will have its difficulties. This is part of the contract of being alive. But so much of our suffering comes not from the difficulties themselves, but from the idea that they should not be happening, that we should be healthier, stronger, younger, more energetic, that our bodies should be cooperating with our plans. And when we can soften that should, even just a little, when we can allow the body to be as it is today, right now, without needing it to be different, there is often a surprising relief. Not because the discomfort vanishes, but because we have stopped fighting it. And the fighting, as it turns out, was taking more energy than the discomfort itself. This is what becoming aware of the second arrow can feel like. Not a dramatic transformation, not a miracle cure, just a quiet unburdening, a setting down of what was never ours to carry in the first place. There is a Zen verse that says, "Let go or be dragged." And while that sounds a bit forceful for our purposes tonight, there is a sweetness beneath it. It is not a command. It is an observation. When we hold on to what is heavy, we get pulled along by it. When we set it down, we are free to walk at our own pace, to feel the ground beneath our feet, to notice the light through the trees. The body will do what the body does. It will have its seasons, just like the earth. Some seasons will be warm and easy, and some will be cold and hard. We cannot control the weather, but we can choose what we carry through it. And if we can learn, even a little, to stop adding the second arrow, to stop piling stones of blame and fear and shame on top of what is already difficult, we may discover something surprising, that even in the midst of a storm, there is a place within us that is calm, a place where the weather does not reach, a place that the old teachers call our true nature, and that is always, always available to us. Not because we earned it, not because we meditated for long enough or suffered in the right way, but because it is who we are, beneath all the stories, beneath all the stones. It is who we have always been. Let us rest here softly. Let your body be at ease. And when you are ready, we will walk on together for the final part of our journey. We have walked a long way together tonight, you and I, through teachings on impermanence and the open hand, through stories of love and grief and the fires that refine us, through the wisdom of letting go and the tenderness of meeting our own struggles with kindness. And now, as we come to the final stretch of this journey, there is one more truth to share. Perhaps the most important one of all. You do not have to do this alone. There is a word in the Buddhist tradition, Sangha, that means community. It is considered one of the three great treasures of the spiritual life, alongside the teachings themselves and the quality of awakened presence. And the reason it is given such a high place is simple. We are not built to walk through this life by ourselves. This may seem obvious when stated so plainly. Of course we need each other. Of course we are better together. But the truth is, many of us, when we are going through something difficult, have a strong instinct to withdraw, to close the door, to handle it on our own. We do not want to be a burden. We do not want to seem weak. We tell ourselves that we should be able to figure this out, that asking for help is somehow a failure. And the Buddhist tradition says, gently but clearly, no, this is a misunderstanding. Reaching out is not weakness. It is wisdom. Because the love and presence of others is not a luxury. It is a refuge. one of the deepest refuges there is. There was a man who lost his brother quite suddenly. The grief was enormous, the kind that makes the world feel like it has tilted on its axis. Everything looked the same: the house, the street, the morning sky, and yet nothing felt the same. He described the weeks that followed as a kind of fog. He went through the motions of his life. He got up, he ate, he spoke to people, he did what needed to be done. But inside, he felt like he was moving through deep water, every step heavy, every breath an effort. And then he said something that has stayed with many people who heard him tell this story. He said, "The only thing that carried me was the love of my friends." Not his meditation practice, though he had one. Not any particular teaching, though he knew many. The love of his friends. The simple, ordinary, miraculous fact of people showing up. A hand on his shoulder. A meal left on his doorstep. A phone call that said nothing more than, "I am here. I am not going anywhere." They did not try to fix me, he said. They did not give me advice or tell me it would get better. They just stayed close. And somehow, their closeness reminded me that I was still part of something. That I still belonged to the world. That the connection I thought I had lost when my brother left was actually everywhere, in every person who cared enough to show up. This is something that the modern world, with all its emphasis on independence and self-reliance, sometimes forgets. We celebrate the person who can do it alone. We admire strength and self-sufficiency. And there is nothing wrong with these qualities. But they can become a kind of armor that keeps the very thing we need most from reaching us. There is a Zen saying, "If you want to travel fast, go alone. If you want to travel far, go together." And the journey through loss, through grief, through any of the great difficulties of a human life, is a journey that requires going far. It requires endurance and patience and the kind of strength that is renewed, not depleted, by the presence of others. Think about the simplest expression of human comfort. A hand on a shoulder. A cup of tea made without being asked. The sound of someone breathing beside you in a dark room. These things do not solve anything. They do not make the difficulty go away. But they do something that may be even more important. They remind us that we are real, that we are here, that we matter to someone. And in the moments when the world feels like it is coming apart, that reminder can be the difference between sinking and staying afloat. This is one of the most beautiful and practical teachings in all of Buddhism. That belonging is not something we earn or achieve. It is something we remember. And often, it is the people around us who help us remember it. The Buddha said, "If you knew what I know about the power of giving, you would not let a single meal pass without sharing it." And while he was speaking about generosity, there is something even deeper in those words. He was speaking about the nature of connection itself, about the way that giving and receiving weave us into a fabric that is stronger than any single thread. When we share a meal with someone, we are not just exchanging food. We are saying, without words, "You are part of my circle. You belong here. I see you." And when someone shares a meal with us, especially when we are hurting, especially when we feel alone, it is as if the whole universe is gently tapping us on the shoulder and saying, "You have not been forgotten." There is a woman who knew she was nearing the end of her life. She had been ill for a long time, and she had made her peace with what was coming, as much as anyone can. But she told a friend that what allowed her to find that peace was not any single teaching or practice. It was the community around her. "I could not have done this alone," she said. "The fear would have swallowed me. But every time I sat with my friends, every time someone held my hand or simply sat beside me in silence, the fear became smaller. Not because it went away, but because the space around it got bigger. There was room for the fear, and room for the love, and room for everything else. And the room was made of people. This is what Sangha does. It does not take away the difficulty. It makes the space larger. It reminds us that we are held, that we belong, that even in the darkest passage, we are not walking alone. Let us explore one more story tonight. It is a story about seeing, about truly seeing another person, and about what becomes possible when we do. There was a woman who had not seen her son in a very long time. Life had taken them in different directions. There had been distance between them, not just miles, but the kind of distance that grows when words are left unsaid and years pile up like snow. Her son had gone through a difficult time. He had made choices that led him to a hard and lonely place, and for a long while, he had been too ashamed to reach out. And she, for her own reasons, had not known how to bridge the gap. But then he became very ill, and word reached her, and she traveled a great distance to see him. A woman who was caring for him was worried about this visit. She had seen how frail he had become, how worn down by the years and the difficulty. She was afraid that his mother would see all of that, the hardship, the lost years, the choices that had led him here, and that her face would show disappointment, or judgment, or grief. But that is not what happened. When the mother entered the room and saw her son, something shifted in the air. The caregiver watched as the two of them looked at each other, really looked, in that way that goes past the surface, and past the story, and past all the years of distance, down to something much deeper. And the mother's face did not show judgment. It did not show disappointment. It showed something the caregiver later said she would never forget. It was the look of someone seeing a miracle, a look of pure, vast, boundless tenderness, as if she was seeing not the worn and weary man in front of her, but the whole of him, every version of him, the child he had been, the man he had become, the light that was still shining in him, underneath everything. They did not say very much. He reached out his hand, and she took it, and they sat together in a silence that was full, not empty, full of everything that had ever passed between them, all the love and all the distance and all the sorrow held in two clasped hands. The room was quiet. Afternoon light came through the window and fell across the bed in a warm stripe. Somewhere outside, birds were going about their ordinary business, unaware that something extraordinary was happening in this small room. After a while, she began to hum softly, an old melody, something from a long time ago, from when he was very small and the world was simple, and she would sit beside his bed and sing until he fell asleep. She had not hummed this melody in years, and yet it came back to her now as naturally as breathing, as if it had been waiting all this time for just this moment. And he closed his eyes and listened, and his face, which had been so tense and guarded, softened into something like peace. The lines around his mouth released. His shoulders dropped. He looked, for a moment, like the boy she remembered. Not a boy in years, but a boy in the way that all of us are still, somewhere deep inside, young and tender and hoping to be seen. When she left, he said quietly to the caregiver, "I feel all right now." That was all he said, but the caregiver understood. Something had been healed in that room, not the body, something deeper than the body. the wound of separation, the long ache of feeling cut off from love. In the presence of someone who saw him fully and loved him without condition, that wound had closed. This is what true seeing does. It does not require words. It does not require explanations or apologies or working things out. Sometimes all it requires is one person looking at another with the eyes of the heart, and in that looking, both of them are set free. There is a meditation practice in the Buddhist tradition called Tonglen. It is sometimes translated as giving and receiving, and at its heart, it is a practice of connection. The essence of it is very simple. You bring to mind your own difficulty, your own hurt, your own fear. You let yourself feel it, gently, without turning away. And then you remember that you are not the only one who feels this way. Right now, at this very moment, there are countless other hearts carrying the same kind of ache. Other people who are afraid. Other people who are grieving. Other people who are struggling with their bodies, or their loneliness, or their sense of not being enough. And in that remembering, something shifts. The suffering which felt so personal, so isolating, so much like it was happening only to you, begins to open up. It becomes shared. It becomes human. And in that sharing, there is a strange and beautiful relief. Not because the difficulty goes away, but because the loneliness of it dissolves. You are no longer one small person carrying an impossible weight. You are part of a vast human family, all of whom are carrying their own version of the same weight. And there is a tenderness in that recognition, a compassion that flows not just toward others but back toward yourself. The Buddha taught that the root of suffering is the illusion of separateness, the belief that I am here and you are there and there is a hard wall between us. And what practices like Tonglen reveal, what stories like the mother and son reveal, what the simple act of a friend showing up with a meal reveals, is that the wall is not real. It never was. We are connected, deeply, inescapably, beautifully connected. And the moments when we feel this most clearly, the moments when the wall dissolves and we see each other truly, are the moments when we are most fully alive. There is a verse from the old teachings that says, "Just as a mother would protect her only child with her life, even so let one cultivate a boundless love toward all beings." And when we sit with this verse, we begin to feel what the Buddhist tradition means by love. Not a small, personal, conditional love, but a love that has no edges. A love that includes everyone and everything. A love that is, in the end, the same thing as awareness itself. This is what the mother in our story was showing her son. Not just personal affection, though that was part of it. She was showing him the love that sees past everything, past every mistake, past every hard year, past every wall that life has built, and sees the light that has never stopped shining. The light that is in every one of us. The light that is us. And so we come, at last, to the three refuges. In the Buddhist tradition, when a person is seeking shelter from the storms of life, they are invited to take refuge in three things. These are not doctrines to believe in. They are not rules to follow. They are more like doors. Doors that are always open, always waiting, always ready to welcome us home. The first is presence. The simple, radical act of being here. Not lost in the past, not spinning into the future, but right here, in this breath, in this moment, in this body, in this room. Presence is the ground we stand on. It is the one thing that is always available, no matter what is happening around us or within us. And when we rest in it, even for a moment, we find that it can hold far more than we thought possible. It can hold joy. It can hold sorrow. It can hold fear and peace at the same time. It is vast enough for all of it. The second is love. Not love as a feeling that comes and goes, though it is that too, but love as a quality of the heart that is always present, even when we cannot feel it. Love as our nature, the way warmth is the nature of fire and wetness is the nature of water. We do not have to create love. We only have to stop blocking it. And when we let it flows toward everything, toward ourselves, toward others, toward the whole aching, beautiful world. This is the love the mother showed her son. This is the love the friends showed the grieving man. This is the love that the wife discovered at the bedside of her husband. It is always here. It is always available. It does not run out. The third is awareness itself. That vast, open, luminous quality that is always here, behind and beneath all of our experiences. The sky behind the clouds, the silence beneath the noise, the stillness at the center of the storm. This awareness is not something we achieve. It is something we are, and it cannot be damaged by anything that happens to us. It cannot be diminished by loss or sickness or sorrow. It is, as the old teachers say, our true home. The place we return to again and again, no matter how far we have wandered. Presence, love, awareness. These are the three refuges, and they are not somewhere else. They are not something you have to go looking for. They are here. They have always been here, as close as your own heartbeat, as near as your next breath. There is a beautiful verse that captures the spirit of everything we have explored together tonight. It says that to live in this world, truly live, you must be able to do three things. To love what is here, even though it is passing. To hold it close, with everything you have, knowing that your very life depends on this willingness to love. And when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. This is the whole teaching. This is the whole path. Love and let go. Love and let go. Again and again, with courage and tenderness and an open heart. You have been doing this your whole life, whether you knew it or not. Every breath you take is a tiny act of receiving and releasing. Every day that dawns is a gift you accept, and every evening that falls is a letting go. You are already practicing. You have always been practicing. And the peace that this practice leads to is not something far away or hard to reach. It is something that is here, right now, in the quiet of this moment, in the gentle rise and fall of your breathing, in the warmth of your own living heart. You belong to this life. You belong to this moment. You belong to each other and to the vast, tender, shimmering web of existence that holds us all. And that belonging is not something you can lose. It is not something that can be taken from you. It is who you are. Rest in that tonight. Let it hold you. Let it carry you. You are home. Let us take one last gentle breath together here. Feel the stillness. Feel the warmth. And when you are ready, we will close our evening together. And so our journey together comes to a close. Not an ending, really. More of a resting place. A warm spot by the fire where you can set down whatever you have been carrying and simply be. The teachings we have shared tonight are not things you need to remember perfectly. They are seeds, and seeds have their own wisdom about when to grow. Some may take root tonight. Some may stir in you weeks from now, in a quiet moment when you least expect it. Trust that. Trust the seeds, and trust yourself. If there is one thing to carry with you as you drift towards sleep, let it be this: you are already whole. You are already enough. The love and the peace and the presence that the old teachers spoke of, they are not somewhere else. They are not something you need to earn or achieve. They are here, woven into the fabric of your being, as natural as your breath, as constant as your heartbeat. Love what is here. Hold it gently, and when the time comes, let it go with grace. This is the whole of the path, and you are already walking it beautifully. So let the night hold you now. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let your breathing slow and deepen. You are safe. You are held. You belong. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.